The film opens in a quiet Minnesota home blanketed by snow. Inside, an elderly woman named Barb sits solemnly before an urn containing her late husband's ashes. She gazes at an old photograph of the two of them, lost in the memory of when they first met. Determined to fulfill his final wish, Barb packs a few essentials, pins the photo to her truck's dashboard, and sets off across the endless white landscape. Her goal: to scatter his ashes at the frozen lake where their love story began decades ago. As she drives through the storm, a radio broadcast warns listeners to stay indoors due to record-breaking blizzards and dangerous wind chills. Snow quickly builds on her windshield, obscuring the road. She pulls over, checks her map, and tries to make sense of her surroundings. But the storm has erased all familiar landmarks. Stepping out of her truck into the biting cold, she hears a distant crashing sound echoing through the trees. Curious and uneasy, Barb drives toward the noise and soon spots a lonely cabin surrounded by snow. An old man is chopping wood outside. When Barb approaches, she notices faint streaks of blood in the snow. The man freezes, startled. Barb smiles gently and says, "Sorry, I didn't mean to scare you. I'm just looking for the lake nearby." The man nods slowly, explaining that it's just past the hill. When Barb asks about the blood, he dismisses it. "Just a deer I was cleaning." She thanks him and drives off, unaware of the dark truth behind that cabin. Finally, Barb arrives at the frozen lake, the same one where she and her husband once spent endless winter days ice fishing, laughing, and sharing dreams. Tears fill her eyes as she remembers the warmth of those moments against the chill of the world. She opens the urn, ready to say goodbye. Then, a gunshot cracks through the silence. Startled, Barb hides behind her truck. She spots a young girl stumbling across the ice, chased by the same old man, now armed and furious. He shouts, threatening to kill her if she tries to run again, and forces her back toward the cabin. Barb frantically tries to call the police, but there's no signal. As soon as the pair disappears, she gathers her things to escape, only for her truck to get stuck in the snow. Desperate, she starts walking back toward the cabin. On the way, she sees the old man drive off in his truck. Seizing the moment, Barb sneaks to the cabin and peers through a basement window, finding the terrified girl tied up with duct tape over her mouth. "Are you alone?" Barb whispers. The girl nods. Just then, two more vehicles pull up. The old man returns, this time with his wife, who's holding a gun. Barb hides outside, overhearing their heated conversation. Horrified, she realizes the woman had ordered the kidnapping and now plans to kill the girl to keep their secret safe. Barb traces words onto the frosted glass. "I'm here. I won't leave you." Then she races back to her truck, trying to think of a plan. Inside, tension rises as the old man's wife starts bleeding from her nose. Stepping outside, she spots a glove near the door and the message on the window. "Whose glove is this?" she demands. Her husband nervously admits. Some woman came by earlier, asked for directions to the lake. The wife's eyes narrow in rage. If she saw anything, we're finished. Armed and furious, she drags her husband back toward the lake, unaware that Barb has already set a deadly trap. Using her late husband's old ice fishing shed, Barb prepares a hole in the frozen ground. When the old man steps closer, the ice gives way beneath him, plunging him into the freezing water below. His wife manages to pull him out, but Barb uses the distraction to slip away and reach the cabin. Breaking down the basement door, she rushes to free the girl, but finds her chained to the floor. "Hang on, I'll get you out," Barb reassures her. She races upstairs, blocks the sink, and floods the cabin, putting out the fire and destroying their supplies. But before she can escape, the old man's wife opens fire. A bullet grazes Barb's hand, yet she keeps running, vanishing into the snowstorm as gunshots echo behind her. When the couple returns to their cabin, they find it ruined, water flooding the floors and rising toward the basement, where the girl still waits in the shadows. Shivering and soaked after his fall through the ice, the old man staggers back toward the cabin, teeth chattering. Inside, Barb's sabotage has already ruined their supplies. Soaked tinder, ruined tools, nothing left to start a fire. Barb rushes to her truck to tend to the wound in her hand and discovers, with a sick drop in her stomach, that her wedding ring is gone. She races back to the hole at the lake, but the ring isn't there. Overcome, she collapses into memory, the day her husband slipped the ring on her finger, the promises they made, and breaks down in tears. Then Barb spots the kidnapper's handgun lying in the snow. Her grief hardens into resolve. "I have to save her," she whispers, and pushes back through the storm toward the cabin. The old man's wife is frantic in the car, trying to warm him, but his body is failing. "I can't move," he gasps, and she snaps that there's no time. They must finish their plan before dawn. Clinical and cold, she reveals she used to work in an operating room. They'll operate by the lake, where the snow will erase the evidence. Her plan is calculated and brutal. Once the girl is silenced, they'll hunt down Barb and make sure no one survives to tell it. Panic erupts when they discover the missing gun. The wife slaps the old man and orders him back to the lake to set up their grim work. She shoves the kidnapped girl into the car and speeds off, leaving the old man to drag heavy equipment through waist-deep snow to prepare the site. Watching through binoculars, Barb follows his movements. She slips back into the cabin to free the girl, but the basement is empty. She steels herself, jams a hand into the wound to pull a bullet from her palm, and then, with effort born of desperation, stitches herself up using the old man's tools. Blood and snow mix on her sleeves, but she refuses to quit. Barb storms outside, smashes the old man's truck window, and somehow manages to get the radio working. Her voice on the air is raw. "Two people have kidnapped a girl. She's in danger. I'm injured. We need help." But before long, the old man returns and launches himself at her, blaming her for everything. In the struggle, Barb swings an axe and connects, striking his leg, then pins him down. Shockingly, the old man breaks. He confesses the truth. His wife forced him into it. She's sick, obsessed, and they targeted this girl because she'd once tried to take her own life. Guilt and cold combine. He weeps, insists he just needs a doctor. He hands Barb a ring he says he found in the cabin, a shaky peace offering that weakens her resolve. Barb sees a flicker of humanity and orders him to drive to the nearest town to call the police and get treatment. He promises he will, staggers to his truck, leaves behind a handful of bullets, and drives away. Not long after, the wife returns, furious, accusing him of abandoning the plan. He is limping and pale. She rails at him, accusing him of trying to escape. Blood starts dripping from her nose. She claims that if he leaves her now, she'll die. In a frantic, unhinged move, she points the gun at him. The madness tightens around them. Meanwhile, Barb remembers painful flashes of her own past, the pregnancy she lost, the hospital room, the promise from her husband. "We'll try again." Strengthened by grief and memory, she decides to lure help. Pushing her truck back toward the lake, she sets it alight so a plume of smoke will mark her position. The plan works. 2 police officers arrive. Barb tells them everything, and together they head to the cabin. The tension spikes as they approach, weapons drawn, every shadow a threat. But violence erupts. The wife appears, and in a terrifying instant she opens fire, killing both officers, and then turning the gun on Barb. In the chaos, Barb shoots back, wounding the woman in the leg, and rushes to the car, only to find the old man already dead inside. The wife has murdered him. Barb dives for cover behind the cabin, but the woman strafes the roof. The structure creaks, collapses, and Barb is thrown into darkness, knocked unconscious. In limbo, fragmented memories flash. The last morning with her husband, making breakfast, him dying silently at the table. When Barb comes to, she finds herself bound in the cabin basement, not alone. Beside her sits the kidnapped girl, who finally whispers her name, Leah. Summoning every ounce of courage, Barb works against the cuff that binds her. With patience and grit, they manage to free one hand, then the other. The 2 women exchange a look, fragile, fierce, determined, and begin to search the dark, flooded basement for an escape route. Barb and Leah finally spot a back door and rush toward it, desperate to escape. But before they can make it out, the woman sees them through the window and locks the door from the outside, trapping them once again. In that dark, suffocating moment, Barb recalls her husband's final wish, written in his will, that his ashes be scattered at the lake where they'd shared their happiest memories. That thought gives her one last spark of strength. By morning, the woman drags both Barb and Leah to the frozen lake. The old man set up from the night before still stands, a small medical tent covered in frost, eerily quiet. Inside, they find a surgical table and a human liver transplant kit. That's when the horrifying truth hits them. The woman plans to take Leah's liver and transplant it into her own body. Barb pleads with her, voice trembling, "Please, take mine instead. Let her go." But the woman sneers, saying Barb's body is too damaged to be of any use. She coldly orders Barb to restrain the terrified girl to the operating table. Thinking fast, Barb ties Leah's wrists loosely and secretly slips a small nail into her hand, a silent promise of escape. The woman turns her back, loading a syringe, and without warning, shoots Barb in the shoulder. Barb collapses motionless as the woman prepares for surgery. But just as she leans over Leah, Barb rises, fueled by sheer will, and drives a pair of scissors into the woman's side. A brutal fight erupts inside the tent. Surgical tools fly, the lantern falls, and in seconds, the tent bursts into flames. The two women crash through the fire and stumble into the snow, wrestling for the gun. The woman snatches it first, but when she pulls the trigger, click, it's empty. Screaming in fury, she drags Barb toward the same icy hole in the lake, the one Barb dug earlier that night. Meanwhile, Leah frees herself with the nail and escapes from the burning tent, crying out for Barb. At the water's edge, Barb sees Leah running toward her. Bloodied and exhausted, she locks eyes with the woman and makes her final choice. With one last burst of strength, Barb wraps a chain around both of them and pulls the woman straight into the freezing lake. Leah reaches the hole too late. Beneath the cracked ice, Barb sinks into the black water, clutching the urn in her hands. As she opens it, her husband's ashes swirl and scatter across the lake, his wish finally fulfilled. With a peaceful smile, Barb closes her eyes and disappears beneath the ice, sacrificing herself to save Leah. Moments later, Leah kneels by the hole, trembling and heartbroken. She finds an old photograph half buried in the snow, Barb and her husband, young and happy by that same lake. Leah tucks it close to her heart and walks away through the silent snowfall, the wind carrying the last traces of Barb's love. The film ends with a flashback, Barb and her husband, decades earlier, laughing together on the frozen lake as sunlight dances on the ice. The same moment captured in the photograph, frozen in time, forever. Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more stories of courage, rebellion, and the will to be free.